People of Argentina elect Alberto Fernandez as their new president. Chile's government lifts the state of emergency in all regions as calls continue for a new constitution. And in the United States, raging wildfires threaten the city of Los Angeles. From the headquarters of Telestar English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. Alberto Fernandez has been elected as the new president of Argentina. The Frente de Todos party, led by Fernandez, along with former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, won a total 48% of votes. In second place with 40% of votes is outgoing President Mauricio Macri. People across Argentina celebrated Fernandez's victory, as many expressed hope that this is the end of the neoliberal model imposed by President Macri, which has left the country facing one of the worst economic crises in history.
The people are waking up. We cannot stand the oppression of those who have more and they don't give a damn about us. The working people, the poor. So I am happy because the people still have the hope and my daughter will have a better future.
It is fair that Fernandez won because of everything that Macri has made us go through. Hopefully, we can do better and make Argentina the way it was with Cristina.
I think that the current government did everything wrong. They had bad economic policies, which impacted a lot of people who work, and they practically destroyed the middle class. The results that Macri ended up with are well-deserved.
Following Fernandez's victory, the Argentine peso opened slightly stronger against the U.S. dollar. Nonetheless, the central bank announced new currency controls, reportedly due to concerns over outflows of foreign exchange reserves accelerating after Mauricio Macri was voted out of office.
Effective today, we've reduced to $200 per month the maximum amount that can be purchased by individuals with prior authorization from the central bank. I know that this measure, even being a temporary one, is very strict and impacts a lot of people. The goal, I repeat, is to preserve the reserves during this transition period and until the new government defines its economic policies and the uncertainty dissipates.
Earlier, I spoke with Sam Halverson, a lecturer in human geography at Queen Mary University of London and a researcher of political parties and elections in Argentina. I asked how Argentina's new government will handle the economy and Macri's $50 billion IMF loan.
Yeah, so again, here, the kind of initial indications of Alberto Fernandez and his expected kind of ministerial team in the economy has been to kind of renegotiate quite clearly, not necessarily take the more radical posture which was taken by the previous government of trying to claim certain debts as illegitimate or kind of move beyond it, but renegotiate what would be a better or fairer deal for the people of Argentina. And I think this is going to be a kind of one of the more interesting questions about relating to your previous point about how revolutionary or radical are they, how, we know that Alberto Fernandez comes from a relatively moderate position of trying to seek compromise. And I think that one of the key questions would be, and for him especially, how he wants to position himself, Argentina, in relation to both the regional, but in particular the kind of international market, and thinking about China and the USA. So I think, one thing that everyone's agreed is that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. And there's going to be some very tough decisions that they're going to have to make very early on, which could really mark the future of their presidency, but also how they respond to social movements, which can't wait for, national level economic packages to come in. There's urgent pressing needs. And they're going to have to try and find immediate solutions to that, which is, of course, going to be a struggle given the context.
Cristina Fernández de Kirchner and Alberto Fernandez congratulated the re-elected Bolivian president Evo Morales during their own victory speech. I asked Professor Halverson about Argentina's foreign policy shift to come.
Yeah, so I think there will be a clear shift. And I think from a Latin American regional perspective, we've already seen that. I think that, Mauricio Macri marked a very different set of priorities compared to both the previous governments of the Kirchners, but especially Alberto Fernandez. So, for example, how they've responded to the elections in Bolivia and the clear, when on their victory speech last night, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner and Alberto Fernandez both congratulating the clear victory of Evo Morales. a very strong criticism of what's been happening in Chile. And of course, and perhaps one of the biggest challenges or issues to follow will be the relationship with Jair Bolsonaro, who has already come out and made some rather undiplomatic comments in relation to how problematic it is that we've got Alberto Fernandez voted in, having previously talked about ridiculous things such as removing them from the Mercosur and so on. So I think, the big picture here, though, is, of course, having Argentina as a major economy in the region now, and also we mustn't forget how their relationship to Mexico. We've also got Uruguay, who are waiting to see what will happen in an eventual ballotage, which is indicating that the centre-left broad front will probably be removed from power. So it's going to be a very different regional climate than had come before. But certainly Alberto Fernandez suggesting that he wants to maintain the kind of previous kind of regional approach of the centre-left governments in Latin America, while also having necessarily to maintain an international link with regards to their export-based economy, particularly thinking about the US and about China.
In Chile, President Sebastián Piñera has announced the appointment of 8 new ministers, including a new interior minister. The former Minister of Interior and Security, Andres Chadwick, has been the target of many criticisms due to the highly repressive actions of security forces. Replacing Chadwick is Gustavo Blumel, the former Secretary General of the presidency. The Minister of the Economy has also been replaced. The announcement comes hours after he lifted the state of emergency in all regions. Protests have been ongoing across Chile demanding economic and political changes. In response, 20,000 soldiers and police were deployed on the streets. More than 1 million people took to the streets of the Chilean capital on Friday to demand the resignation of President Sebastián Piñera and the establishment of a constituent assembly. But that didn't stop police repression, nor a new somersault by President Piñera. Let's take a look.
Who would have said that these secondary school students pushing for people to not pay for metro trips would open the gates for millions of people? That this angry protest would become a sea of people? Who would have said that in just a few days, civil disobedience would cause the government to tremble, and that the ever-publicized Chilean democracy was just a house of cards? That Sebastián Piñera would bring back the methods of Pinochet, with killings, injuries, kidnappings, and torture? Who would have said that over the course of 1 week, a corrupt president would make jumps worthy of an acrobat? That no one would come out in his defense? That on one Friday, and in this way, the people of Chile would reclaim the right to their own dignity, without leaders, without structure, without formal organization, but with a destination in mind.
We cheer for Telesur, we cheer for Latin America. We are going to change things and move the country forward, not the politicians. We need better healthcare, better quality education, and better pensions. The elderly are completely forgotten in Chile.
This is what all us Chileans want. Peace, equality, harmony in our country. That is what we all want. Without exception, the government has tried to distort everything we are doing, calling it vandalism. But all these people are students and workers. We just want fairness, and we want Piñera to go. He's good for nothing.
They're shameless, thieving and corrupt. They just steal instead of helping the people. Through the pension scheme that has to go, while we are defending our rights. They're just filling their pockets. They're a bunch of rotten rats in a presidential palace. We need to all go there and demand decent education. Damned government, damned Piñera, just a bunch of rats.
We want equality. We want them to admit that the pensions are terrible. We want decent education, healthcare and pensions.
Motorcyclists and truck drivers are natural enemies across the whole world. But in Chile, they protest together against abusive tolls on urban motorways. It's a protest that looks like it's limited, but it's become universal in every direction.
They abuse us in so many ways, with the highway tolls, the pensions, wage, taxes, fuel taxes. It's been a 30% since 1985 in order to reconstruct Chile after the earthquake. And it's still in effect today. These are abuses. Maybe alone they're not so big, but when they're all together, it's complete abuse.
This was an attempt to bring together the people's clamor with concerns highlighted by the Workers' United Center of Chile, or the CUT.
The only way to properly resolve the crisis affecting our country is a new constitution. That's the social pact, and it can only be constructed through a constituent assembly. Before then, we call on the parliament today not to vote for initiatives that do not represent the people who are mobilized. The majority who aren't going to vote because they don't feel represented by political institutions. So there's need to be a mechanism for direct referenda.
Authorities' trigger fingers has had grave consequences. Who knows if in their enthusiasm for repression they were able to comprehend the damage caused, or if it even bothered them. But there they are, and justice could serve. That's why complaints exist, like this presented on Friday.
Suddenly, we saw heavily armed security forces appear. They opened fire close to a group of people. We saw many people injured. Among them was my son Diego. They were shot at with rubber bullets. My son has marks from 11 shots on his body. He's receiving treatment now and will have surgery next week to remove 5 bullets that are still inside his body.
We were marching in a peaceful demonstration. There were families, many women and children. We were marching against repression, and the police special task force simply came down on us without warning. They fired rubber bullets and tear gas at us. The children were hit by bullets as they tried to escape the tear gas. My 8-year-old child and my 16-year-old daughter were hit by bullets.
Many agree Chile is going through a hidden coup d'etat.
We are living through what many constitutional lawyers call de facto state violence. Without any legal basis, they decreed a state of emergency for days, and then a curfew, going against the constitution itself. We've been dealing with heavily armed military patrolling the streets for over a week, and they've been opening fire on our people. We are going to present numerous complaints against police officers who have opened fire on citizens, even against children.
At the end of this historic gathering, President Piñera sent a tweet in support of protesters, as if he had been the one to organize it. But as he pressed the tweet button, the people of Santiago made it clear what they thought of the president.
News from the elections in Uruguay and Colombia after this short break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Following general elections on Sunday in Uruguay, the country is headed to a runoff vote on November 24th to elect their new president. Citizens will decide between the former mayor of Montevideo and candidate for the Broad Front Party, Daniel Martinez, and former senator and candidate for the Conservative National Party, Luiz Poe. Neither candidate managed to get enough votes on Sunday to win in the first round, with Martinez obtaining 39% and Poe 28%.
We are convinced that Uruguayans will vote on who they personally believe will lead this country best, but we are also convinced we can establish talks with many sectors, and we accept this challenge. This challenge is the continuation of the dream of Adol and Ordóñez, of Wilson Ferreira Lunate, and of Rosereñe, a dream of a developed Uruguay.
For the first time in history, an openly gay woman has been elected mayor of a Colombian city. The candidate for the Green Alliance Party and former Senator Claudia Naibe Lopez was elected mayor of Bogota with over 35% of the vote. Sunday's regional elections proved to be a decisive blow against right-wing candidates from former President Álvaro Uribe's party, as they were handed humiliating defeats in the cities of Medellín and Cali.
Today in Bogota, change won. The decision to banish corruption and subservience from the traditional politics of Bogota won. Through citizen culture, quality education, equality, let's defeat and overcome and unlearn machismo, racism, classism, and homophobia.
Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottley has criticized her political contenders, saying that they're incapable of leading Barbados. Mottley was especially critical of Democratic Labour Party President Verla de Pisa.
Who would we be leaving Barbados to if we were to fail? Who? Taverla? Who has moved from pillar to post and who is a political water lily with no roots in anything? Floating, floating, floating. She has moved from Christchurch West. She talks about going to St. James because she says she grew up there. She talks about St. John because she believes that that is an easy pick, but she don't know Charles Griffith waiting for her. And then somebody said, but your family from St. Lucie, go to St. Lucie. Now, if that is not a political water lily floating all about, I don't know what is.
At least thousands of people across Brazil celebrated the 74th birthday of jailed former President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva on Sunday. More in this report.
10,000 people from across Brazil gathered to the Lula Libre Vigil in front of the federal building where former President Lula da Silva has been imprisoned for nearly 600 days.
Lula is happy because he knows he has not been forgotten. There was a moment when he first was sentenced in which he feared the people would forget about him, but I think they have proven that they will not forget. The evil media has not managed to erase his memory or his history, what he did and what he can still do.
Aunt Celia, one of Lula's favorite chefs back in Brasilia, traveled over 1,000 kilometers with food for the former president.
I came to cook for him. He's the president of the poor, of the people. His love for us is something incredible, something we can barely understand. He loves everyone equally.
Solidarity acts in support of Lula took place in 86 cities in Brazil and 28 cities abroad. People called for popular uprisings for increased presence at the polls in response to neoliberalism.
Latin America is rising against neoliberalism. We had progressive governments that were defeated by neoliberalism, but have been proven their formula is not good for the people. I hope that today's gift for Lula is the election of Alberto Fernandez in Argentina, while the Chilean people continue to rise up against decades of oppression and inequality.
The celebrations coincided with an ongoing debate in the Supreme Court that could annul Lula's sentences and set him free. On top of this, the court is scheduling a vote on a writ of habeas corpus to suspend Sergio Mora's role in the Lava Jato investigation for the many irregularities he committed during Lula's case.
There's a feeling that in the next few weeks, Lula could be freed, and that's why events like these are so important.
Despite many expectations for Lula's freedom being put on the doorstep of the Supreme Court, demonstrators agree that pressure on the street cannot flatter.
Mozambique's incumbent president, Filipe Nyusi, was declared winner of last week's elections, as 8 members of the Electoral Commission resigned, citing irregularities. According to results released on Saturday evening, Nyusi gained 73% of votes, beating his main rival, Osufo Momade, a former rebel movement turned main opposition party, Renamo, who secured 21.88% of the vote. Renamo has rejected the results, describing them as null and void.
Today we are witnessing here national shame. We are 8 members of the National Electoral Commission who are distancing ourselves from the final results of these elections. The results that was read today by the President of the National Elections Commission does not reflect the truth. It can be said that everything was done in secret because the 8 members were not there. You can check the meeting minutes. We are 8 members that did not sign the final document read here by the President of the National Electoral Commission.
Humanitarian organizations involved in the rescue of migrants in the Mediterranean Sea have accused Libyan militias of threatening their crews and boats. Footage released by German rescue organization CI shows gunmen on a Libyan-flagged speedboat firing warning shots at a ship that was rescuing migrants who were stranded at sea. A CI official said their ship was surrounded by 3 boats with masked and heavily armed men who fired shots in the air and in the water. The ship was, however, able to rescue all of the 90 stranded migrants, including 1 pregnant woman. On Sunday, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa led thousands of members of the African National Congress in paying tribute to the late anti-apartheid icon Oliver Reginald Tambo. Members of the ANC gathered at a cemetery in northern Johannesburg to lay wreaths on Tambo's grave. Tambo, who would have turned 102 years old on Sunday, was the longest-serving president of the ANC. He led the organization from 1969 to 1991. He died in April 1993 at the age of 75, just 1 year before the historic 1994 general election, which brought an end to the apartheid system of government. More stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Protesters in Lebanon cut major roads in Beirut using cars, tents, and dumpsters to keep pressure on the government. Security forces were deployed in larger numbers on Monday in Beirut, but have so far allowed the barricades to remain in place. Banks, universities, and schools remain closed since last week. This is the 13th consecutive day of protests calling on the resignation of government authorities.
We close the road so people can't go to work. This is how we increase pressure. This is our way to paralyze the country. They might try to frighten us, but we won't live here. We have been here for 13 days, and we will keep the roads closed.
Students in Iraq have joined anti-government protests in Baghdad as thousands stood fast in the capital's Tahrir Square, defying a crackdown that killed scores over the weekend. The protesters also erected barricades on a bridge leading to Baghdad's fortified green zones. At least 74 people were killed by security forces on Friday and Saturday, and hundreds were wounded in the second wave of this month's protests against Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi's government. But in response to these protests, authorities have declared a curfew in Baghdad. The Baghdad operations commander says that the curfew, which will run from midnight to 6 a.m. local time and will be valid until further notice. The head of the Israeli Blue and White Party, Benny Gantz, says his meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to form a coalition government did not yield any progress. Last Wednesday, Gantz was given a mandate to form a new coalition government after Netanyahu's efforts ended in a deadlock.
Yesterday, I met Likud chairman Benjamin Netanyahu. It was a thorough meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to achieve any real progress. I hope we will achieve it in the future. The best option was and still is a unity government headed by the blue and white, together with Likud, the way the people have voted. The worst option of all, especially for the Israeli people, is elections.
The European Union has agreed to extend the Brexit deadline until January 2020, suggesting that the United Kingdom will not leave as planned on Thursday. According to EU Council President Donald Tusk, the decision is a flextension, meaning that the UK could leave before the deadline if a deal was approved by Parliament. This comes as UK members of Parliament prepare to vote on proposals by Prime Minister Boris Johnson for an early general election on December 12th. Thousands of people in Los Angeles, the United States, have been ordered to evacuate due to raging wildfires. The fires broke out early on Monday, consuming more than 400 acres in the hills around Interstate 405. According to the fire department, at least 2 structures in the area were on fire, but there have been no reported injuries so far. Meanwhile, a state of emergency was earlier declared in the state of California due to a huge blaze burning through the famed Sonoma wine country. Guyana has won the Albert Einstein Gold Medal for Excellence at the first global robotics competition in Dubai. The team of 10 persons, aged 15 to 18, received the most prestigious award in the competition, making history for their country and the CARICOM region. The award is an ode to the overall outstanding design and performance of Team Guyana's robot. 190 countries participated in this global robotics competition. The tiny Caribbean island, with a population of just over 780,000, is now ranked among the top 25% teams in the world. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at tellusenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.